Here's another wicked story from the Robinson Township Cemetery Tour. It is one of love, betrayal, and murder. Hattie and Carl Kokosinski and their young sons, Max and Eddie, had moved to Chicago from Germany, where Carl landed a good-paying job and became friends with a coworker, Frank Dabrowski. Around 1903, Frank purchased a 23-acre farm in Robinson Township and would travel back and forth between Chicago and Michigan. Carl and Hattie made trips to the farm with Frank, and in 1904 they decided to move there with the intention that they would keep the farm up and take in summer resorters needing a place to stay. Carl wasn't too thrilled with living on the farm and decided to go back to Chicago to work along with Frank. This left Hattie and the two children all alone to look after the farm and house. And on November 9, 1905, a fire burned down the barn on Frank's property. Hattie claimed her children had been playing with matches in the barn. Frank came back from Chicago to collect the $300 insurance money for the fire and decided to stay a bit longer. Well, Hattie liked Frank. He was nice to her and the kids and paid her for her work. Her husband, on the other hand, barely sent any money, only $10 in the last 10 months, according to her story. But there were plenty of rumors going around that Frank and Hattie were more than just friends. The gossiping mouths of Robinson were talking about Frank and Hattie so much that even the sheriff knew the rumors. The sheriff was most concerned about the one that involved Frank slowly poisoning his friend Carl in an attempt to make his death look natural. Carl had undergone 2 intestinal surgeries, and when the idea of Carl being poisoned was brought up to Frank, neighbors claimed Carl suddenly started to look better. On the night of November 26, Frank held a party that lasted until 5 a.m. While neighbors laughed and danced the night away, no one had a clue that Carl was back in Grand Haven. He had arrived by boat from Chicago after a letter was sent to him suggesting there was something romantic going on between his friend and wife, and that the party they were having was actually a farewell party as they were going to run away together the next day, and the insurance money on the barn was enough to help them get by, or so the rumors said. In Grand Haven, Carl procured a driver, a bottle of whiskey, and paid the man to take him out to Robinson Township. Along the journey, the driver noticed Carl was acting strange, but then saw the bottle of whiskey and assumed he was just drunk. Carl had the driver drop him off near the farm. Carl met up with a neighbor, Matt Brantner, and brandished his gun, shooting it at a stump and telling him, "Those same bullets will kill all in that house." Matt was concerned, but supposedly it was his family that wrote Carl and told him about the criminally intimate behavior going on. Carl left and made his way to Frank's farm. It was 8:30 a.m., and Hattie, Frank, and a leftover partygoer named Smith were having breakfast in the kitchen. When Carl walked into the house, pointing the gun, the trio barely had time to react. Carl shot Hattie first, sending a bullet through her nose and into her throat. Another shot hit her in the arm. Frank was shot 3 times in his stomach. As Hattie and Frank ran away, Smith was sitting at the table stunned. Carl shot him in the stomach, but after Smith begged for his life, Carl let him go. 3-year-old Max was still in bed, but Eddie, who was 5, was up and about. Frank and Hattie had already managed to get to a neighbor's for help. Meanwhile, the worst was yet to come. No one ever knew how it all went down inside the house, but Carl gathered both of his sons, and when police arrived, both children were lying in pools of blood. Eddie, the youngest, was dead, but the oldest, Max, while shot in the head, was still alive and badly injured. The last thing Carl did was turn the gun on himself, putting a bullet in his own head. The little boy was brought to Ira Robinson's house, but doctors were not optimistic. Hattie would recover from her injuries. Smith had the least amount of damage, but Frank was on the edge of death after some of the shots entered his lungs. The Grand Haven Tribune pointed out that Hattie spent more time next to Frank than her wounded son, who did not end up living. As the sad situation ramped down, threats were made against Frank and Hattie. even ones that involved being tarred and feathered if they dared move in together after what had happened. Miraculously, Frank fully recovered. In the early part of the next year, he sold his farm and moved back to Chicago, where he married Hattie. This true story was brought to you by Jeanette Wyden of Loudoun District Library. And for more information, visit loudonlibrary.org. Thank you.